Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pulse Point by Synpulse. My name is Jenya Tkachenko. I'm a manager at Synpulse and also the host. And today with us, we have Geoff Parslow from Objectway. Geoff, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Geoff, before we get rolling into all of the questions we have prepared for you, I was wondering if you could do a little introduction about yourself, your role, and maybe what Objectway does in general.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Geoff Parslow. I'm head of business development and sales for Objectway Canada. Just a quick background on myself. I work in the wealth management industry. I spent my entire career going back to 1997 working in wealth management, mostly as a professional salesperson, working with advisors and firms. For my first 15 years, I worked on the manufacturing side. So I was a wholesaler of mutual funds in the broker-dealer network in Canada. In 2016, I made the pivot to move over into the technology space, and so I've been working in wealth management tech ever since. Today, I work with a firm called Objectway, a large multinational firm focused on delivering high-value wealth management solutions to private banks, asset managers, and wealth managers around the world. We operate in 15 countries. In 2024, Objectway acquired a firm here in Canada called Nest Wealth, which is one of the first kind of fintech firms that kind of came out, wealth tech firms that came out about 15 years ago. And today we are now looking to grow our business in the Canadian marketplace.
Awesome. It really sounds like you've gotten to see the industry from multiple different vantage points. And so I want to ask you, given all of your experience, particularly regarding compliance, what do you think are the biggest shifts right now in the industry, and what do you foresee happening in the next, let's say, 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, so if I rewind the clock and you go back to let's say 2000, 2005 timeframe, we just gone through the kind of tech crisis when the tech market blew up, and compliance kind of came onto the forefront, particularly around clients and suitability and those types of things. So regulators got onto it, and all of a sudden compliance started to steamroll and gain momentum and more compliance. And it was the biggest, complaint from advisors that compliance, and fast forward to today, the cost of compliance has just grown exponentially in terms of the hard costs to do compliance, to deal with the regulatory changes of compliance, which is, again, on an ongoing basis, continues to evolve, but also from the perspective of taking time away from advisors, from growing their business, managing their clients, to spending time doing mundane tasks around compliance. So it becomes an issue of advisor productivity. So, for example, I was chatting with head of wealth from one of the Canada's largest banks, and he was responsible for the entire wealth management complex within that bank. And we had a good discussion around, what was the goal of compliance today, and how they were going to handle compliance, and what was going to make it easier for them today from a wealth management perspective. So when we got into this discussion about providing his company with solutions, we were focused very much on the operational side. So this idea of streamlining operations, reduce operational costs, and creating efficiencies within the operational elements, and he completely shut that down. His comment to me was, Geoff, look, we have 400 people working in operations that deal with compliance. They're not paid a lot of money. That's not our biggest cost center when it comes to compliance. We've got 3,000 advisors on average who make $500,000 to $1 million a year. We don't want them spending any of their time on compliance. So any solution that you bring to us needs to be met where it's needed most, which is at the branch level, which is for advisors to increase productivity. They're our biggest money makers for the bank in wealth management. We want them focusing on growing their business. We don't want them filling out applications. We don't want them filling out KYC refreshes. We don't want them missing KYC refreshes and those types of things. So second part of your question is what's happening now? Automation. That's where we come in. And I think that's where technology can really add value to the world of compliance, is by automating all of these mundane tasks for account opening, KYC refreshes, auto-filling documents, form filling, guiding advisors and clients, using AI to guide advisors and clients through the questionnaire process. So it's a smart form, not just going through forms and adding forms so you don't forget anything. So I think that's really what we've seen from a compliance perspective. There's a lot more of it. It's costing a lot more money, and we need to automate these tasks so that advisors in particular can spend more of their time with their clients, growing their business, adding value to their clients.
You touched a lot on manual processes. Do you find that that's currently the biggest headache for advisors, or do you think that there are other themes of issues that compliance technology can solve?
So the answer to your first part of the question, yes. The manual processes that are involved in simple things like opening up accounts. Okay, so you bring on a client and you bring on a family. They've got a net worth of, let's say, $1 million or $2 million. They've probably got 10 or 15 accounts. They could have corporations. They could have a charity that they work on. They could have a family trust. You have very complex family structures, particularly at the high net worth and the ultra high net worth level. So when you bring on a new client and you have to open up all those accounts and you have to produce those account opening documents plus all the associated documents that go along with that, you could be looking at 20 different documents that you have to fill out for one particular family. Now, think about that at scale. Think about a firm that brings on an advisor with 1,000 clients, and you have to repaper all of those clients. So certainly the manual tasks that are involved in doing that today is substantive. The risks involved in that is the time risk. So if you have an advisor, for example, that moves from one firm to another, their desire is to move those clients over as quickly as possible, because the longer it takes, the higher the risk that they don't keep that client. So their book size can shrink. The firm who they're moving to also has a vested interest in bringing those clients over as quickly as possible. So from that perspective, I think automating those tasks, not only automating those tasks of opening up a single account, but creating automation to open up accounts at scale and at speed is paramount to firms being able to, realize the growth and the gains necessary that they are spending the money to invest in bringing an advisor over. They want those assets over because ultimately they're charged based on, they make their money based on AUM. If the AUM is not with the firm, they're not charging any money. So certainly today what we see is a lot of firms are still doing things manually. Account opening systems don't support all account types. They don't support all workflows for different types of clients. If you think about a number of client use cases, for example, you have the most modern use cases, which is your 25-year-old or 30-year-old that wants to do everything on their own through their mobile application. They want to onboard themselves. They have no need to talk to a client. They want to do it on their own terms. So that's one use case. You have the higher net worth people where they have more complex family structures where the advisor or the associates are going to assist them through the onboarding process and the application process. Then you just have your typical elderly person who is not technology literate, where you have to print off the documents, drive them to their house, and have them wet sign that. So one of the challenges is that there are endless use cases for client onboarding and account opening. And so right now systems have to be able to accommodate that and be flexible enough to accommodate that. And that's what we at Objectway are really focusing on right now, is really making sure that our system is comprehensive and flexible enough and configurable enough so that we can accommodate all these different workflows and all these different types of clients, because it is about client segmentation at the end of the day.
So I kind of want to expand on that a little bit, just like we expanded on the previous question. What are the themes of problems that Objectway is solving for your clients, other than the personalization at scale that we just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, the problems that we're solving for clients, like if you look at the C-suite, for example, they're focused on kind of three, maybe I argue maybe four kind of primary areas. So when we sit around and talk to the people who are making the decisions ultimately on this, it's the CEO, chief operating officer has a huge vested interest, and then your heads of wealth, et cetera, depending on the size of the firm will determine who you're dealing with. When we're talking to RBC, we're not talking to the CEO at that level. But typically those are the people that we're talking to in decision-making capability. They're very much concerned with growth. They want to grow their business. They want to make more money. They've got shareholders. They want to grow earnings per share. So certainly it's got to be able to help them grow their business. On the operations side, they want to streamline their operations. They want to reduce friction for clients, reduce friction. They just want to drive operational efficiencies to help them save money and save time from an organizational perspective. There's also a huge element of risk as well. So, firms, particularly financial institutions, especially financial institutions, big focus on risk management. And so when you talk to the operations people, you talk to the risk management people, they want they want to bring on a system, or they want to bring on systems that help them reduce organizational risk. And that's kind of an important one I'd like to elaborate on if I can, because I think it not only exists within the organization. You want to reduce the risk from a client perspective. You have to make sure that their KYCs are up to date. Depending on the type of your advisor that you are, discretionary, non-discretionary, you have to update your KYC documents every year or every 3 years. And the penalties can be substantive if you don't do that correctly. Today, with the advent of AML and terrorist watch lists and all these types of things, doing that at scale is very, very difficult. So firms from a risk perspective have to be able to handle at scale the ability to continually manage their clients' KYC, identity verification, AML, terrorist watch lists, and all those types of things. On the other end, from an operational risk, and we'll elaborate more on this, I believe, at the end of this discussion, is around project delivery. As we know, projects, and from you guys, and this is your business, is helping clients to successfully deliver and deploy projects. The amount of risk involved in those projects is substantive. And the larger the project, the more complex the project, the larger the firm, the higher the risk. So part of what we try to do at Objectway is we try to help clients reduce operational risk from a project delivery standpoint. And we'll talk a little bit about that. That involves requirements gathering, go through proper RFI, and have a real bona fide process. But I know we'll talk about that at the end, of the discussion. But risk is also important. So, growth, operational efficiency and cost savings, and reduce risk. That's ultimately what decision makers that we deal with are looking to do anytime they bring on any type of technology application.
Given that there are, so many criteria that are required to be hit properly in all of these projects, how have you found that your clients are able to navigate all of these changes?
It's very difficult. The changes from a compliance perspective are coming very fast. I was sitting in a regulatory meeting, a national regulatory meeting a couple of months ago, and you had the heads of all of the major regulators in Canada, the OSC, CIRO, et cetera, all sitting, on the panel, and you had all chief compliance officers and compliance personnel and operations personnel dealing with compliance and regulatory stuff from all of the financial institutions in Canada. And it was very clear to me that regulators are there to regulate, and they want to do more of it. So the question is, knowing that they want to do more, and firms inherently would like to do less, but I think they need to work together hand in hand to find what's the optimal level of regulation. Because ultimately, it is the end client that we're all thinking of at the end of the day, to make sure that they have the protection that they deserve working in the Canadian financial services. It's that trust that's required. It's trust that really makes our system work, and why people trust the banks and all that type of thing. With the advent of technologies such as cryptocurrency, are adding an extra layer of complexity into the regulatory complex. So I think regulation is only going to increase over time, which means firms have to adapt. And given that the level of regulation is increasing, and in so many more places, as a technology provider, we see it as a major opportunity for firms like ours to step in and really help solve those key problems. So again, automation is a big one. Business process automation, using AI to help people guide through various processes. On the onboarding, I'll talk about onboarding because I work in wealth management. That's kind of the big thing. It's always been the big thing, but it continues to be the big kind of burden on firms. Forms change over time, and they change constantly. And I just got off a call with a bank before I came here. And one of the big questions they had was, how do we deal with the ongoing changes to regulatory forms? And they gave us 100 use cases. They change this, they change that, they change this, and you have 30 days to make this change. And it's not easy to make change when you talk about it. Anytime a bank wants to make change, you can't do it in 30 days. So these changes happen so fast. So technology going forward should be able to identify these changes automatically, and then automatically make changes to the processes in the back end. Now, we're talking about AI. We're talking about a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not an expert on, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm sure you can bring someone on here who can discuss that. But ultimately, we'd like to use technology to identify those changes well in advance and have those changes already made in the platform automatically, so that our client firms don't have to come to us and ask us to make those changes. That's how smart technology should be, and we believe we're moving in that direction to get there.
So Geoff, we touched a lot on, having to stay ahead of the curve, having to make predictions regarding the changes that are going to hit firms next. So do you feel like firms are looking at compliance as a cost center or as a strategic differentiator?
I think it's ultimately both. You can't ignore the fact that there's a cost to compliance. And I've seen some data from the large firms where it's gone up 2 to 3 times. The cost of compliance has gone up substantively over the last decade. But firms are working diligently to try to streamline these offerings and to help reduce cost at the end of the day. Where I do believe it's a strategic advantage is on the advisor productivity side. So I'll give you an example. So an advisor is going to open up in any given year new accounts for their existing clients. They're going to bring on new clients. They're going to bring clients on from other firms where they're going to have to repaper them because they're coming to a new custodian or they're coming to a new firm. So you have to do a certain level of account opening and those types of things. Same thing with KYC refresh. So if you're an advisor, you're effectively a business owner. You have your revenue and you have your cost lines, and you want to spend more time driving your revenue. So where it becomes a competitive advantage is if a firm can offer a very eloquent, streamlined process to help automate these mundane tasks that can keep the advisor doing high-value activities and their associates doing high-value activities, they end up making more money. They become more efficient. They make more money. Talent acquisition and keeping good talent around is very difficult, and this is where technology can really help. Hiring an associate with a CFA, lots of experience, and then forcing that person to go through Excel spreadsheets and fill out application forms on a day-to-day basis. What are the odds that person is going to see value in that role? So this notion that AI and automation is going to make these roles redundant, we're not seeing that. Maybe on the operational side, but certainly not at the advisor level. What it's actually doing is unlocking unused capacity from these high-value associates and advisors to spend more time on high-value tasks. And that's ultimately what everyone wants to do. I've never met someone who has said, Geoff, I like doing low-value work every day. Give me the most low value. Nobody wants that. Everyone wants meaning out of their job, and they want high-value tasks. So if you're a firm and you can offer your advisors from an onboarding perspective, from a PM perspective, however you look at it, an efficient, nice-to-use piece of technology that allows them to manage their business, manage their clients, manage their portfolios, then I think it becomes a competitive advantage.
Geoff, as a seasoned professional in the market that's obviously seen a lot from different vantage points, as we talked about earlier, I'm curious to dig in a little bit into your implementation experience. And generally, when working with clients or maybe even consulting companies like ours, what have been the most common causes of failed implementations?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's many. I mean, deploying enterprise level technology just on its face is a very difficult task. It requires a very specific skill set. It requires time. It requires flexibility. And it requires the proper level of resourcing. So where I've seen it really work well is, a firm will engage with us on a project, and they will have a well thought out process to go through the due diligence of the whole engagement. So they'll typically start off with, an RFI questionnaire, and we'll respond to the questionnaire, which we always appreciate because it makes our life a lot easier. We understand what they're looking for out of the gate. That means that if we don't have functionality, we can just say that, and we've actually turned down potential projects because we don't meet their primary functionality. But let's make the assumption that we get through the RFI. The firm now has 2 or 3 or 4 firms that they've shortlisted, and they want to go through the RFP process. So now you're going through a more substantive RFP process. You have all of your requirements well thought out. You've looked at all the personas in the organization. They've spent meaningful time understanding what is needed from a product perspective, and they've laid it out into a nice, eloquent RFI that we will then respond to, have an opportunity to ask questions and those types of things, and then we submit that. We go through the demo process, We go through the different teams, integration team, different personas, advisors certainly are at the table, operations people, compliance people, whoever is going to be using the technology or will touch that technology. There will be some sort of working group and engagement, go through a series of demos, etc. And then they go through the selection process. Now, my view is that a firm, if they don't have, a lot of firms don't have the resources internally to actually go through this. We work with consulting firms. This is an opportunity for you to bring someone on. Not only can they fast track, these firms also, these tech firms like Synpulse can help you avoid any pitfalls. Don't make the mistakes, do the right things here, do the right things there. The net result is, it might take a little bit more time and cost you a bit more money up front, but the guarantee is you're not going to run into any landmines a year or 2 years down the road. So my recommendation is at any firm at any level, if you don't have the internal resources, project managers, business analysts, etc., internally, then it's incumbent on you to go out and hire a third-party firm who has experience in your domain, delivering projects like the one you want to deliver, and engage with them early on and bring them in to help, drive this process forward.
What, for you, makes a good implementation partner or working with a consulting company, and the opposite? What some pitfalls when it comes to working with vendors?
We engage with consulting firms in two ways. I would say the majority of consulting firms that we work with are hired by our client firms. And so it's their relationship, and they're there advocating for their client, as they should be. They're not advocating for us. They're advocating for the client, and they're doing what's in the best interest of the client. And so they're very process-oriented. There's not a lot of emotion built into it. They've got scorecards, like they really know what they're doing, but they work for the client. They're paid for by the client, and there's definitely a wall put up between us and them and the client at the end of the day. The other way we engage with consultants is if we find ourselves in a situation where we have a new client and we're also honest with ourselves and we say, well, maybe we don't have the expertise to deliver this kind of project. We will go out and source a relationship like Synpulse to come in and to help us out with the delivery and the project management of that particular project. But what's really important, what we always look for is, do they have the technical expertise themselves to deal with the type of firm that we're working with, to work with the custodians? Do they have on the ground localized experience from a PM perspective, from a business analyst perspective? Do they understand our clients? Do they understand the project? And very importantly, have they successfully delivered projects like this in the past? So when we hire a consultant, we go through the same criteria that probably a wealth management firm goes through, because ultimately they're going to be supporting us in delivering this project. We had a call last week with a huge multinational wealth management technology firm who has a huge business here in Canada and the US. And we're in discussions on a strategic partnership. And one of the questions they asked was specific to that. Do you guys use outside help to deliver these projects? And what would cause you to do that? And that was my response. If we get into a project where the complexity is so high, and the risk is so high, we will absolutely bring someone in from the outside who's got that localized expertise, who's got that functional expertise, and who also has, proven success doing these types of projects. We will absolutely bring them in to help us out, because their clients are wealth management firms. So they also want to reduce their risk at the end of the day. So, this comes up all the time, and I don't think anyone should be scared to bring on a consultant. Where I think people need to be really diligent in this process is, have they done this before? Consultants, services is one of the biggest industries we have, and everyone is a consultant. Everyone wants to be a consultant, but ultimately, success breeds success. So when we look at people that we're working with, it's because they've had success doing what we need them to do, and that's helping us manage our risk. And we can always present that to our client and say, this is our partner. Here are the firms that they help to deploy. Here's the contact person. Feel free to call them. Mm-hmm. So now you're getting a reference, professional reference from these people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Your network is your net worth.
It is, yes. Yes, of course.
Jeff, well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being able to uncomplicate, really sometimes tough subjects in our industry. And I want to end on a fun question. Is there anything that you're really excited for professionally in the next, let's say, year or so?
Yeah, I mean, Objectway, has come into Canada as of 2024, and we've now fully absorbed Nest Wealth, and we're now one company, and it's been a great experience. We've got a great team on the ground here in Canada, and we've got a great team of support, internationally. So I rely on partners not only in Italy, where our head office is, but also in the UK. The UK market is very similar to the Canadian market. We also have good partners in Belgium and the Netherlands. But ultimately, what I'm really excited about is that Objectway is bringing in some technology that is very modern. They've kind of thought about technology in a bit of a different way than I think what some of the providers here in North America. So professionally, and this is essentially to why I chose to come to Objectway in the first place, is that I believe their suite of wealth management solutions and back office operational solutions is something that doesn't really exist here in Canada today. And there's an opportunity to replace some of these legacy systems that have been in place now for the last 25 years, but there's been no new entrants to the marketplace to come in and displace them. So Objectway, having been around for 35 years, 250 plus enterprise level clients, like true enterprise level clients. They bring in a wealth of experience, and they've spent millions and millions and millions of dollars updating and upgrading their platform. So it's modern, it's fully built out. And what I'm really excited about is introducing that to the Canadian marketplace, because like I said, having worked in wealth tech for the last 15 years, there's definitely a need in the marketplace for what Objectway has to offer. So professionally, that's what I'm most excited about, is to introduce Objectway's platform to the Canadian market.
Awesome. And we're really excited to continue to see you guys grow here in Canada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. This is great.